How's that work then? The pressures the BBC are under are caused by the BBC. Hi, it's me again. And do you know what? Colour me surprised. You know, I'm always talking about why doesn't the BBC just show ads? Then we could all save, or the households could save £169.50 a year. Other channels manage to survive on it. Why is the BBC above it? Why? There's all these debates that go on all the time about TV licence fees at the minute and what they're going to do in 2027 when the charter expires and what the future of the BBC and the licence fee is. You hear all these debates. Never once in any of those debates have I heard them say, why don't the BBC just show ads then? I'm in a trade paper. Randomly skimming about is not something I frequent, and look at the headline that greeted me. Huge consequences. Industry dissects prospect of ad-funded BBC. Written by Ella Sagar on the 22nd of April 24. Ad-funded BBC. Now, I've only skimmed this. I'm not sure what it's about, but it looks like it might be mostly radio-based. But I never read these things in advance because I want to react to them in the same way you react to them when you first hear it. It makes sense, right? So that's why most of my videos are ropey as well. So let's have a look at this and let's see where it takes us, shall we? What would happen to the market if the BBC were to introduce ads against its content? The households of Great Britain would save £169.50 a year. End of article. Oh, that's not the end of the article. Carry on. Would it grow the pie and give more options for agencies and advertisers? Yes. Or would it lead to market collapse and leave the service unrecognisable from the one we know today? And that would be a bad thing? The BBC being unrecognisable from the one that we know today, where it sucks up money from struggling British households and protects some quite terrible people over the time and pays ridiculous salaries to people who sell crisps. Would it be so bad if the BBC was unrecognisable from the one we know today? I put it to you. This was a key debate at the Future of Audio and Entertainment last week, which weirdly, my invite never arrived in the post for that. Weirdly. In a presentation at that Future and Audio Entertainment thing, Radio Centre CEO Matt Payton argued that the BBC might not stop at podcast advertising and could also consider radio, online and TV advertising further down the line. Yeah, BBC is quite big into podcasts. Not a podcast enthusiast myself, but some of the BBC podcasts are quite big. Now, if you happen to listen to a podcast, I'm sure many of you do, halfway through, you get some ads, don't you? And you have to keep pressing the +30 button to bloody skip them, don't you? And the BBC want to start selling adverts during their podcast because they're quite big hitters and there's some free money to be made there. Doesn't bother me, right? I was listening to a podcast on the way home today, which is rare for me, but there's one I'm into at the minute. And halfway through, it started playing an ad for BBC iPlayer. That's some targeted advertising for you, isn't it? So they don't mind buying ads, so they may as well sell them too. Got no problem with it. Would they consider radio, online and TV advertising further down the line? They already do 3/4 of that. They do online advertising. Don't forget, BBC Studios owns 100% of UK TV. And if you go on UK TV Play, is it called? Loads of ads on there. Ads all over the bloody shop for that. What else do BBC Studios own? Oh, yeah, 100% of BritBox International. And that sells subscriptions. BBC America shows ads. TV advertising further down the line. Well, we just covered most of that. UK TV shows the shows that you long since pay for, apparently with your licence fees, even though that's not how it worked. Like Top Gear, Dragon's Den, all that, all over it, isn't it? Only Fools and Horses on UK Gold. Chocked full of ads. If they can put them on there, what's the reason you can't do it on the telly then? No idea. While he did not want to have a predictable swipe at the BBC on behalf of the commercial sector, I save that for me, I'm good at that. There's a genuine concern that the ad-funded model for BBC Radio would be bad for audiences, bad for advertisers, and ultimately bad for the BBC itself. So if they played ads on the radio, it would be bad for audiences, bad for advertisers, and ultimately bad for the BBC itself. Bad for audiences. Well, adverts mean you have to do better. There's a reason that ITV bought in around about the same sort of money that the BBC made from licence fees last year. It's because they had stuff people want to advertise. You name a big hitter show, they always seem to be on ITV lately. I'm a Celeb and all that. Not my cup of tea, but massively popular shows. And they bring in so much money. They're not making them out of the goodness of their heart to entertain the good British people. If you have a look at the viewer ratings for things like I'm a Celebrity, they have sponsors throughout the bloody thing. And the more the audience figures rise, the higher the rate card for showing an ad during that show is. They are raking it, and good for them. They're making their own money. I'm proud of you, ITV. Well played. So it's not bad for audiences because the broadcaster is incentivized to make better stuff. If the BBC make tat and they have to go commercial, they'll fold in a couple of years, be asking for government bailouts, all of that. Won't they? Because no one's going to want to spend their advertising money with the BBC. If they're not getting any viewers, they'll spend it elsewhere. So it's not bad for audiences because the BBC is incentivized to make better stuff to bring in bigger audiences. Okay. Bad for advertisers. How's that work then? It's yet another platform that advertisers can use to reach their target audience. In what way is that bad for advertisers? And ultimately bad for the BBC itself? Well, if you work for the BBC, you might consider that ultimately it's bad for the BBC itself because you're losing 4 billion quid a year. I'd be pissed off if I lost 4 billion quid a year. But it's not bad. The BBC is bloody useless. The reason that they have a deficit in their funding every bloody year is because if they were in the black at the end of the year, we'd all be saying, well, we can pay you less next year then, can't we? So they have to make it look like they're struggling. So it wouldn't be bad for the BBC itself because the BBC would have to pull its socks up. It would have to cut the cloth. Any more cliches I can throw in here? And it would have to do better and make better stuff. So ultimately, in the end, it would be good for the BBC. Short term, it would be terrible for the BBC, all the people that work there. But long term, it would be better for audiences, advertisers, and the BBC itself. I didn't get my invite to the future of audio and entertainment. Among the key findings are that the size of radio advertising is not sufficient to fund both BBC and the commercial sector. The BBC does not offer the more valuable younger audiences for advertisers, and it's not a premium on quality in radio advertising. I do agree with that part. Yeah, they wouldn't make any money if they made the radio stations commercial. They wouldn't get any advertisers apart from the odd local butcher, a double glazing company. There's a reason that all the local commercial stations were bought up by Heart and amalgamated into one. It's economy of scale, reach a larger audience, you've got bigger numbers. You can make more money from advertising. But that's the way the BBC's going anyway. They're building counties into multiples, aren't they, for most of the day? Do you think that's going to end there? Or do you think after a couple of years of putting all the counties into multiples, they'll make it national for a few hours a day? Once they've done that, you might as well show it. Because you are now directly competing with Heart. That's where BBC radio's going. Although they don't really want to broadcast radio anymore. They want to keep it on the Sounds app. But they've got to wait for all the old people to die off for that because there'll be too much kicking off, won't there? He concluded his presentation by saying an ad-funding BBC would be bad for everyone. Has he not listened to what I just said? It'd be good for everybody. The audiences are saving £169.50 a year. They're used to sitting through ads anyway. It'd be better for the BBC in the long term. An ad-funded BBC is where we should be aiming. Commercial radio will be significantly, perhaps irreparably damaged, and the choice available to listeners will be narrowed, or stations disappear. Well, that's the free market economy, isn't it? The strong survive, the weak fall. That's just business. Right? So everyone's incentivized to make better stuff, and the people who win in the end are the audience. I think it could have really big consequences for Adland. If you look at the BBC, it's funded by 3.8 billion, it's more than that now, it's 4 billion worth of licence fee payer money. And unlike TV, the BBC are really dominant in the audio space. But not so much in the radio. They're dominant. They are in local radio, but they're amalgamating that. They're going to turn themselves into Heart. And how many people do you know now who listen to radio for music? I don't know one person who tunes the radio in for music anymore. It's just not a thing that happens, is it? I don't want to listen to whatever gaff you're playing. I want to listen to what I want to hear. So I'll put Spotify on, I'll put Apple music on. Not that I pay for that. I've got my own music that I have on my phone. I just hit shuffle and listen to whatever plays. I enjoy that. If I want to listen to stories or the news, there are other options for that. Radio is dying. The BBC are dominant. It's their podcasts that are killing it and their Sounds app. Why can't I just show ads on that? What's this? Others conceded that the BBC had to explore all the options on the table, given the pressures it's under. Someone's a fan of the BBC who was talking at the future of audio and entertainment, aren't they? The BBC's ultimate goal, the thing that would keep them hard all night, would be to keep the licence fee, keep it going up with inflation, currently $169.50 a year, and also show ads, which I believe is what RTE does, isn't it? Not that it's a bit of a mess over there. I haven't really talked about it. But you have to pay the licence fee to RTE and they show ads. God, can you imagine the BBC? That's their ultimate dream. But what makes me laugh about that statement there is, given the pressures it's under. How's that work then? The pressures the BBC are under are caused by the BBC. They get 4 billion quid a year, and I've talked about it a lot. I've talked about it loads on the channel. Have a look at Wikipedia, the source of all true information, obviously, for GDPs of countries, and you will be surprised that some of the names of countries you see there that you recognise have a GDP of less than 4 billion quid a year. And they pay teachers, they build roads, they have infrastructure, they have to do all these things. They run a country on 4 billion quid a year. And BBC cannot run a media organisation on 4 billion quid a year. There's a reason for that. As I said earlier, if they were coming in the black every year, we'd want to pay them less. So they've got to come in deficit so they can ask for more money. There'll always be a deficit, even if they were showing ads. They're still not under the commercial pressures of having to create better stuff to get more advertising revenue in, because it's all free bunts, isn't it? Because they're still getting their licence fees. They would still come in the red. They have no interest in coming in under budget or doing anything right. That's why they're building all these facilities. That's why their main head office is just off Regent Street. The pressures they're under at the BBC are caused by the BBC themselves. If they went commercial, they would have to sort that out. Commercial works for everybody. It's better in every way. We save a bit of money a year. Another broadcaster is incentivized to make better stuff to please a larger audience. Who loses in this? No one loses. So I think I'll leave it there. I rattled on enough. If you want to read all of this article, I'll put a link to it in the description below. Go and have a read if you want. And while you're down there clicking that, leave your comments. Let me know what you think about this. How people can defend the BBC saying don't go commercial, it's beyond me. To me, my little brain, it makes no sense. Maybe you can correct me on that. And while you're down there leaving your comment, correcting me on all of that, hit all the buttons and subscribe and all of that stuff. Because if you do that, hopefully I'll get to see you in another video again soon, won't I? Ta-da.